So the first time I saw someone wearing a veil, probably about 10 years ago, give or take a year. My first thought was that she seemed very pretentious. I didn't know this girl. I didn't talk to her. She was way on the other side of the church, but she seemed very pretentious to me, and that she was the only reason you'd wear a veil is to show everyone that you're so much holier and better than them. And so I had a very negative reaction to it, probably because of the way that I was raised. It wasn't something we did, and maybe there was probably a negative look towards it from my family. So this negative perception, is something I'm always aware of. Now, when I wear a veil, especially if I'm attending a mass or going to an adoration chapel where women don't normally veil, and it makes me sad that, unfortunately, I know that a lot of people assume I have that same holier-than-thou disposition. So if possible, I try to go out of my way to dispel that impression. But yet, even knowing that occurs, I still do it, and because I realize it can cause others to sin in their hearts. But in my own heart, I know that it's a beautiful and appropriate sign of reverence towards God. And it's a reminder to myself and to others that I'm doing something out of the ordinary because I am in the presence of the God of the universe. And so veiling, it holds me to a higher standard of dress as well as behavior. So I'm not going to walk into a church or a chapel with shorts and a t-shirt on and then put a veil on. It just doesn't fit together. And I'm not going to talk during Mass and make jokes and even just do anything that's not focusing on the Mass, because, the veil is just a reminder. And it's also a sign of reverence and humility, which I think we can always, any way that we can find to be more reverent and be more humble is a good thing. And it's towards nothing on this earth. It's towards nothing else in the church except for, or no one else except for God. And it's a cover of sanctity, and it helps me to focus in prayer. I actually had a friend, I remember when I first started veiling, she was telling me that she loved her veil because it was like a horse blinders, which was just a silly comparison. But the idea was that it kind of, because it hung on the side of her face, it didn't allow her to kind of be looking out of the corner of her eye and seeing what everyone else was wearing or what everyone else, was doing. And so it just helped her to remember to look forward and to focus forward and to focus upward. And that's true. It's very helpful in that way. And if others think less of me or think I'm doing it for the wrong reason, then it's just another way that I can suffer in humility to atone for my sins and the sins for all other souls. And I pray that anyone who thinks like I used to just a decade ago about veiling can also come around to the beauty of it and choose to participate in the tradition of wearing a veil. And on the practical side of things, it's a physical reminder that this time is set apart as something special, like I said earlier about what you would wear. So just like church shoes or special church shoes or special church clothes, we all have them. It's just another special article of clothing, an item that helps me to get into and stay in church mode, which is hard to do no matter what, but especially if you're trying to wrangle children throughout Mass. And on that note, I found that it actually has the same effect on my daughter, who's 4. She knows that we have certain expectations for her when she puts her veil on and enters the church. And she loves her little doily veil. She's never complained. It's just a normal part of life for her, and she can't wait to have a big girl veil and for when she has her first communion, because little girls still today wear veils for their first communion, so it just makes that much more sense for her that she'll wear a veil because she always does. And the same thing for maybe one day if she ever gets married. She'll wear a veil, not because it's just part of a special wedding dress, but because she wears a veil every time she enters a church. So it makes sense to her. Even to a 4-year-old, it makes sense that she wears a veil right now. And so for those that would say it's silly or outdated to wear a veil, I would say, well then, why did you wear a veil when you got married? Did you really think about it? Or why do you put a veil on your daughter when she makes her first communion. It might just, maybe wasn't thought about. You didn't think it out. Maybe it's just cute. Maybe it's what everyone else does. But it's really because it's a tradition. And in our church, it's just choosing just one instance of that tradition. And so the tradition of wearing a veil never really died away completely. So I've just chosen to participate in the revival of the tradition and practice it to its fullest, and the way it makes the most sense to me. And I didn't, and that was the other thing. When I first started wearing a veil, it wasn't for me. I guess I'm not a very theologically thinking person. I'm not educated as a priest or someone who has a degree in theology would be, so I don't know that much about the theological side of veiling, except for now what I've learned. But at first, it was just one of those things like, okay, I've read enough, I've learned enough that this seems like a good thing for me for spiritual reasons as well as practical reasons. So let me just try it. It wasn't like okay, I'm doing it from now on and forever, because I think I would have been too scared to do it. So, because it is a big jump in humility, and it makes you look different from everyone else. And I remember trying to find one that was like the same color as my hair at first, just so that was even less conspicuous. And so, but I finally just said, what, I'm just going to try it, and I'm going to wear it to church today. And if I feel comfortable, then I'll keep wearing it. And maybe it's not a good thing to say because you're going to feel uncomfortable, but I just thought, if in my heart, if deep inside, I feel like this is a good thing. And if I can tell y'all from the start, even though I was uncomfortable, even though I was aware that people were looking at me, because at that time where I went, I was the only person, maybe a couple other people that have had a veil on. But I just knew deep in my heart, like, this was a good thing. It made sense all of a sudden. That's why I wore a veil when I got married. I should be wearing one anyway. And just, it felt like such a wonderful way to be reverent towards God in the Eucharist. It made me so much more aware that He's truly present, something that's so hard to remember for us Catholics who go to church every Sunday. And so now, even now, years later, I've been wearing a veil for probably, 3-4 years now, and I every Sunday I'm still so aware of the God in that tabernacle, and then the God that I'm approaching at the altar, at the altar rail, and the veil is a great help for that. So I don't think it's not necessary, it's not required. I know it's not required, but I do believe it's the better option. And I don't pass judgment on women who don't wear a veil, because the reality is there are women who veil for the wrong reasons, or who are not truly loving Christ and others in their life and doing what we're called to do. And there are beautifully holy women that I know who don't veil. But I think that wearing a veil is the better option on the path towards spiritual perfection, and ultimately, and hopefully, towards heaven. And in this day and age, it goes against our worldly ways and feelings to be told by male priests and old St. Paul in our heads. But the fruit of veiling, if I'm choosing it for myself, if I'm really thinking about why I do it, and I made the choice to do it, the fruits that I've received from veiling of humility, of reverence, modesty, prayerfulness, all these things that I need extra help with, these are all undeniable signs that veiling is a good and holy thing to do.